A young former Navy SEAL lay unconscious beside his wrecked car, buried under Wyoming snow, his breath fading with the storm. Doctors were hours away. Hope was almost gone. Then a German Shepherd mother appeared out of the white silence, followed by her two tiny puppies. She pressed her head to his chest. The puppies curled against him for warmth. And somehow, his breathing returned. What happened next would change an entire town and prove that sometimes survival comes on four legs and a beating heart. If you believe in second chances and unbreakable bonds, subscribe now and stay with us for stories that restore faith. Winter came early to Silver Ridge, Wyoming, the kind of winter that did not announce itself gently. Snow swallowed the town in long, relentless sheets, pressing silence into the streets and bending the pines until they creaked like tired bones. The mountains rose dark and immovable beyond the highway, their peaks lost behind low, racing clouds. By nightfall, the wind had turned sharp, scraping across the asphalt and carrying with it the promise of a storm that would close roads, isolate homes, and test whoever dared to move through it. Wyatt Hale drove alone through that storm. He was 29, tall and broad-shouldered, with the lean, disciplined build of someone who had once been sharpened by purpose. His dark hair was cut short, military clean, and his face, handsome in a quiet, restrained way, was shadowed by days of exhaustion rather than neglect. Blue-gray eyes stared through the windshield, focused yet distant, as if he were always braced for something unseen. Wyatt had left the Navy SEALs 6 months earlier, but the posture, the alert stillness, and the weight behind his gaze had never left him. Neither had the war. The road over Silver Pass curved sharply, bordered by snowbanks taller than the hood of his truck. Wyatt's hands tightened on the steering wheel as gusts rocked the vehicle. He wasn't headed anywhere important, just driving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking dragged him back to memories he wasn't ready to face. The desert heat, the blast, the moment everything went white and silent, just like this. Then it happened. A shape burst from the darkness ahead, brown, fast, alive. A deer, panicked and blind with fear, leapt across the road. Wyatt swerved instinctively. The tires lost traction on black ice, and the world tipped sideways. Metal screamed as the truck skidded, slammed through the snowbank, and rolled once before crashing nose first into the ravine. The impact stole the air from his lungs. Wyatt's head struck the window, pain flashing bright and sudden. The steering wheel crushed into his ribs. Then everything slowed. Snow drifted through the shattered windshield, settling on his jacket, his hair, his eyelashes. Blood trickled from his temple, warm at first, then quickly cold. His chest rose once, twice, and then barely at all. The storm pressed on, indifferent. Not far away, deeper in the forest, Maple was running. She was a German Shepherd with a thick sable and black coat, dulled by frost, her body lean from weeks of scarce food. Her ears were alert, her movements cautious but purposeful. Maple was a mother, and everything she did revolved around the two small lives struggling to keep up beside her. The puppies, no more than 7 weeks old, stumbled through the snow on unsteady legs, their coats puffed and uneven, their eyes wide with cold and confusion. The storm had driven them from their den hours earlier. Maple stopped suddenly, head lifting. Her nose twitched. Through the howl of wind and the falling snow came a sound that did not belong to the forest. Metal tearing, followed by something softer. A low, broken groan. She turned without hesitation. The crash site appeared as a dark wound in the white landscape. Maple approached carefully, hackles raised, until she saw the man slumped inside the ruined vehicle. Blood, stillness, the smell of fading breath. Something deep and instinctive stirred in her chest. This one was dying. Maple climbed through the broken door, planting her paws against Wyatt's chest. She pressed her head beneath his chin and shoved hard, once, twice, urging air back into lungs that were forgetting their purpose. When he did not respond, she whined sharply, a sound filled with urgency rather than fear. The puppies followed, squeaking softly as they scrambled onto his body. One curled against his side, the other pressed close to his throat. Their small bodies radiated warmth, fragile but determined. Wyatt's fingers twitched. A shallow breath rattled through his chest. Maple stayed there, unmoving, her body shielding him from the wind, her breath warm against his skin, as if sheer will might be enough to keep him tethered to this world. The storm raged on. Several miles away, headlights cut weak tunnels through the snow as Harper Quinn guided her aging SUV along the service road. Harper was in her early 30s, slender but strong, her auburn hair pulled into a low, practical knot beneath a wool hat. Her face bore the calm focus of someone used to emergencies. Clear green eyes, a mouth set with quiet determination. She had been raised around animals, trained herself through years of study, and now ran the only veterinary clinic within 30 miles of Silver Ridge. It wasn't an easy life, especially in winter. Her clinic was struggling. Heating costs climbed. Fewer clients could afford care. More animals appeared injured, displaced, or abandoned along the outskirts of town. Harper noticed patterns others ignored, tracks where there shouldn't be any. Scars that spoke of steel rather than nature. Something was wrong in the forest, but she hadn't yet put a name to it. As she rounded the bend near the ravine, Harper slowed. Through the wind came a sound that cut cleanly through the storm. Sharp, urgent barking. She pulled over, the cold bit instantly as she stepped out, flashlight in hand. Paw prints marked the snow, fresh and frantic. Harper followed them downhill, heart pounding, until the beam of her light landed on the wrecked truck. And then she saw them. A man lay motionless inside the vehicle, blood streaking his face. A German shepherd was half inside the cab, half out, her body pressed tightly against his. Two tiny puppies clung to him, trembling but stubbornly alive. "Oh, my God," Harper breathed. She knelt beside the door, checking the man's pulse with shaking fingers. It was there, faint, uneven, but present. The dog watched her closely, tense but not aggressive, eyes filled with something that looked disturbingly like understanding. "You're keeping him alive," Harper whispered, awed. "Aren't you?" The dog did not move. Snow thickened around them, the storm closing in. Harper looked at the road, then back at the man. She couldn't lift him alone. She couldn't drive him out in this weather. Her fingers fumbled for her phone as the wind screamed overhead. She dialed the town's emergency line. "Silver Ridge Dispatch," a voice answered. "I found a car crash on Silver Pass," Harper said quickly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Male, unconscious, but breathing. Severe weather. I need help. Now." As she waited, she kept one hand on the man's chest, the other raised slightly toward the dog in a silent promise. "Hold on," she thought. "All of you." The wind had grown sharper by the time the call reached the town's emergency line. Snow swept across the pass in thick, blinding sheets, piling faster than the plows could clear it. The dispatcher's voice came strained and clipped over the radio as the situation was relayed to the only person equipped to respond. Cole Whitmore, the sheriff of Silver Ridge, listened in silence. He was a tall man in his early 40s, broad across the shoulders, with a build shaped by years of mountain patrols and long winters rather than gyms. His dark hair was threaded with gray at the temples, his face weathered but steady, eyes calm in a way that suggested he had learned long ago how to keep panic at bay. Cole pulled on his insulated jacket without hesitation and grabbed his keys. If the ambulance couldn't make it up the pass, then he would. His pickup truck was built for nights like this. Reinforced suspension, snow chains already fitted, emergency lights cutting a hard red-blue glow through the storm. The road fought him every mile, but Cole knew its curves by heart. He had pulled stranded drivers from worse conditions than this. When he reached the ravine, Harper Quinn was already knee-deep in snow, her flashlight cutting frantic arcs through the white. Relief flickered across her face when she saw him climb out of the truck. "Roads blocked both directions," Cole said, assessing the scene quickly. His gaze fell on the wrecked vehicle, then on the man inside, and the dog pressed against him. "We can't wait." Maple lifted her head, eyes sharp, body tense. When Cole stepped closer, she let out a low warning growl, not aggressive, but unmistakably protective. The puppies whimpered softly, their small bodies tucked against the injured man's chest. "It's all right," Harper murmured, crouching beside Maple. "He's helping." Cole moved slowly, hands visible, his voice calm and low. "Easy, girl. We're not taking him from you." With Harper guiding him, Cole carefully slid his arms beneath Wyatt's shoulders. The moment he tried to lift him, Maple pressed harder against Wyatt's chest, growling again, as if refusing to let the connection break. Only when Harper kept a steady hand on Maple's neck did she allow the movement, never taking her eyes off the man she guarded. They worked quickly, coordinating without words, the storm forcing every decision. Cole carried Wyatt to the truck. Harper ushered Maple and the puppies close, wrapping them together in spare blankets. Maple jumped up into the bed of the truck on her own, positioning herself beside Wyatt as though she belonged there. The drive to Harper's clinic was slow and tense. Snow slammed against the windshield, visibility shrinking to nothing more than the faint suggestion of the road ahead. Inside the cab, Wyatt's breathing was shallow and uneven. Harper monitored him constantly, her fingers checking his pulse, her jaw set in concentration. Maple leaned forward, resting her head against Wyatt's chest. Harper noticed the change almost immediately. His pulse steadied. "That's strange," Harper murmured. Each time Maple pressed closer, the rhythm strengthened, as though the contact itself anchored him. The clinic stood dark at the edge of town, a low building half buried in snowdrifts. Cole kicked the door open, and Harper rushed inside to light the space. The room filled with warmth as heaters roared to life. The smell of antiseptic and animals replaced the raw scent of the storm. They laid Wyatt on the examination table. Harper worked with swift precision, cutting away damaged clothing, checking for internal injuries, stabilizing what she could with limited supplies. Cole stood back, watching the door, the windows, the storm beyond. Maple refused to move. When Harper tried to shift her aside, Maple growled softly and placed her head squarely on Wyatt's chest again. Harper froze, then slowly withdrew her hands. She watched the monitor she had rigged from portable equipment. The numbers climbed. "Stay," Harper whispered to the dog. "Just stay." Wyatt's eyelids fluttered, his brow furrowed, breath hitching, then settling. For a brief moment his eyes opened, unfocused, glassy, but alive. The only thing he seemed to register was warmth, a steady pressure, the sound of breathing close to his own. Then he slipped back into unconsciousness. Cole exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "That dog saved his life." Harper nodded, shaken. "She's still saving it." As the storm battered the clinic walls, Cole crouched to examine Maple more closely. Up close he noticed the injury on her foreleg, a thin but angry wound, partially healed, jagged in a way that didn't belong to nature. "That's not from ice or rock," he said quietly. Harper followed his gaze. "Steel," she said. "A trap." Cole's expression hardened. "Illegal ones. I've been cutting those out of Northwood for months. Thought I'd scared him off." "Him?" "Evan Briggs," Cole replied. "Hunter, trouble. Been warned more times than I can count." He stood, jaw tightening, as he looked back at Wyatt. This isn't just about animals anymore. Whatever Briggs is doing out there nearly killed a man. Harper glanced at Wyatt, then at Maple and her puppies huddled close. Then he needs to be stopped. Cole nodded once. I'll handle it. Outside, the wind howled, but inside the clinic, something fragile held. Wyatt breathed, Maple watched, and the puppies slept pressed against a heartbeat that refused to fade. Snow continued to fall around Silver Ridge, quieter now, as if the storm had learned to breathe. Behind the veterinary clinic, a narrow cabin stood half-sheltered by fir trees, its windows glowing faintly against the white. Inside, Wyatt Hale lay propped on a narrow bed, his body wrapped in borrowed flannel and blankets that smelled faintly of pine and antiseptic. Healing came slowly. Each breath still carried a dull ache. Each movement reminded him how close he had come to vanishing. Maple never left his side. She lay on the floor beside the bed, head lifted whenever Wyatt stirred, her dark eyes tracking every shift of his chest. The puppies, small, clumsy bundles of life, had claimed the foot of the bed as their own. They tumbled over one another during the day, then collapsed together when exhaustion won, their soft breaths sinking with the steady rhythm Maple guarded. Harper Quinn checked on him often, bringing soup, changing bandages, and speaking in the calm, measured tone that came naturally to her. In the close quarters of the cabin, she seemed different than she had at the clinic, less guarded, more human. Her auburn hair often slipped loose from its tie, framing a face marked by quiet resilience rather than polish. "You're stubborn," she said one afternoon, setting a mug of tea on the nightstand. "That's usually a good sign." Wyatt managed a faint smile. "I've been told worse." The nights were harder. Darkness crept in early, pressing against the cabin walls. When sleep finally came, it brought the past with it. Wyatt woke gasping, heart racing, the echo of explosions roaring in his ears. His hands clawed at the blankets, searching for something solid, something real. Before Harper could reach him, Maple sprang onto the bed. She placed her weight carefully against Wyatt's chest, warm and steady. Her head rested beneath his chin, her breath slow and even. Wyatt's hands closed instinctively around her thick fur. The panic ebbed, replaced by the grounding certainty of warmth and life. "Easy," Harper whispered from the doorway, watching as his breathing calmed. "You're here." Wyatt nodded once, eyes wet but clear. "She does that," he said quietly, "like she knows." Maple lifted her head just enough to look at him, then settled again, satisfied. Days passed this way. The storm outside softened, though winter still held the land tight. Wyatt spent hours watching the puppies explore the cabin, their personalities already emerging. One was bold, charging headfirst into everything with a crooked wag and endless curiosity. The other moved more carefully, pausing to study before acting, eyes bright with quiet intelligence. "Rusty," Wyatt said one morning, nodding toward the fearless one. "Because he doesn't know when to stop." Harper laughed. "And the other?" "Juniper," Wyatt replied after a moment. "Feels right." Maple accepted the names without ceremony, as if she'd known them all along. On the other side of town, Cole Whitmore moved through the woods with practiced care. Snowshoes crunched softly beneath his boots as he followed a line of disturbed earth. The traps were crude but effective. Steel jaws hidden beneath snow, baited and waiting. Cole knelt, jaw tight, as he dismantled another. Too many, too deliberate. He marked locations, photographed wounds, and logged coordinates, the weight of frustration settling heavier with each find. Evan Briggs' name surfaced again and again in his mind, but suspicion wasn't enough. Not yet. Back at the cabin, Wyatt had grown stronger. He could stand now, take slow steps across the floor, though Harper watched him like a hawk. Maple followed his movements closely, her body tense whenever he swayed. One evening, as snow thickened again, Maple slipped out the door. Wyatt noticed immediately. "Maple?" he called, pulling on his boots. Panic flared, sharp and sudden. He grabbed his coat and stepped into the night, the wind biting at his face. Tracks led toward the tree line, the forest swallowed sound, leaving only the hiss of falling snow. Wyatt pushed forward, ignoring the ache in his ribs, following the marks until a faint whine reached his ears. He found her tangled in a steel trap, foreleg caught, body trembling from pain and cold. "No, no," he breathed, dropping to his knees. His hands shook as he worked the jaws apart, teeth clenched against the pain in his chest. Maple whined softly, but didn't snap, trusting him completely. When the trap finally gave way, Wyatt scooped her into his arms. She was heavier than he expected, solid and real, her warmth seeping through his coat. "I've got you," he whispered, voice breaking. "Don't you leave me. You pulled me back. I owe you my life." The walk back blurred into effort and breath and determination. Harper was already at the clinic when he arrived, eyes wide as she rushed forward. "Wyatt, what happened?" "Trap," he said simply, lowering Maple onto the table. Harper worked quickly, her hands steady despite the tension in her jaw. She cleaned the wound, stitched what she could, wrapped the leg carefully. Maple lay still, eyes locked on Wyatt the entire time. When it was over, Wyatt sank into a chair, exhaustion finally claiming him. He reached out, resting his forehead against Maple's. "Stay," he murmured. "Please." Maple huffed softly, her nose brushing his cheek. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, something unspoken settled into place, an understanding forged in pain, loyalty, and the quiet promise of survival. Snow softened the edges of Silver Ridge, turning the town into something quieter, almost gentle. Word traveled faster than the wind this time. It began with a few murmured conversations at the gas station, a story passed over steaming mugs at the diner, then spread until it settled into the collective heart of the town. A young former SEAL pulled back from death by a stray German shepherd and her pups. People started showing up. They came in old trucks and snow-dusted SUVs, carrying what they could spare. Firewood stacked neatly beside the clinic wall, boxes of medical gloves, bandages, antibiotics. Canned food and fresh bread left quietly by the door. No one asked for recognition. They simply nodded at Harper Quinn and went back into the snow. Harper watched it all with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. She had lived in Silver Ridge long enough to know its people were kind, but this felt different. Her clinic, once teetering on the edge of closure, now hummed with life again. The heating system ran steadily. The shelves were stocked. For the first time in months, she slept without calculating how long she could keep the lights on. Wyatt Hale stood off to one side, leaning lightly against the cabin railing, watching it happen. He had never been good at receiving things. Help, especially. In the teams, you carried your weight or you didn't belong. Out here, people offered warmth without asking what he had done to earn it. It unsettled him more than the storm ever had. Maple lay at his feet, her injured leg wrapped but healing, her eyes following every movement around them. She was stronger now, appetite back, posture steady. When Wyatt shifted, she rose with him, close and watchful, the way a seasoned partner moved through unfamiliar ground. He smiled faintly. "You'd make a hell of a teammate," he murmured. She flicked an ear, unimpressed but present. At the edge of town, Sheriff Cole Whitmore worked through the growing stack of evidence with a patience born of long winters and longer investigations. Maps were spread across his desk, red markers circling points deep in the Northwood forest. Photographs documented steel traps hidden beneath snow, baited lines leading toward an illegal corridor cut through protected land. This wasn't careless hunting. It was organized. Cole's jaw tightened as he studied the patterns. Evan Briggs had always skirted the law. Loud, reckless, convinced rules were for people weaker than him. But this was something else. This was greed paired with cruelty. He gathered what he could, then drove out to the cabin behind the clinic as the snow thickened again. Wyatt listened without interruption as Cole laid out the findings. His face was calm, but something old and sharp focused behind his eyes. "You shouldn't be out there," Harper said immediately. "Your leg?" "I'll manage," Wyatt replied. His voice was steady, not reckless. "I won't stand by while he keeps doing this." Maple rose at his side, a low sound rumbling in her chest, as if she understood the choice being made. The forest swallowed them quickly. Wind drove snow sideways through the trees, reducing visibility to little more than instinct and experience. Cole moved ahead, careful and methodical. Wyatt followed, favoring his injured leg but refusing to slow. Maple ran slightly ahead, nose low, body tense, reading the ground in ways no map could. They found the camp just after dusk. Steel traps lay scattered beneath tarps. A crude shelter leaned against a stand of pines. Tracks crisscrossed the snow, human and animal alike. Cole lifted a hand, signaling stillness. Then the gunshot shattered the quiet. The blast tore through the trees, splintering bark inches from Cole's head. He went down hard. The wind knocked from him. Evan Briggs stepped from behind the shelter, tall and broad, his beard heavy with frost, eyes wild with fury. He smelled of smoke and metal, his rifle already swinging back into position. "Stay out of my woods," Evan snarled. Maple didn't hesitate. She lunged, a flash of dark fur and muscle, colliding with Evan's legs before he could fire again. He stumbled, cursing, trying to swing the rifle toward her. Wyatt moved. Pain flared through his leg as he closed the distance, but he ignored it, tackling Evan from the side. They crashed into the snow, breath steaming, fists and weight and fury colliding. Evan fought dirty, swinging the rifle butt, but Wyatt wrenched it free and sent it skidding across the ice. Cole forced himself upright, weapon drawn, voice cutting clean through the chaos. "Sheriff's office! Drop it!" Evan froze, chest heaving, eyes darting from the gun to Maple, who stood between him and Wyatt, teeth bared, unyielding. "Hands behind your head," Cole ordered. Evan obeyed. The cuffs snapped closed, final and cold. Cole gathered the rifle, the traps, the documents Evan had tried to burn. Evidence enough to end it. Back in town, the arrest traveled faster than the storm. People gathered quietly as Cole's truck rolled in. Evan Briggs slumped in the back. No cheers, no shouting. Just a shared understanding that something dangerous had been stopped. Wyatt didn't stay long. He returned to the cabin, exhaustion settling deep in his bones. Harper followed later, finding him seated on the steps, Maple pressed against his side, Rusty and Juniper tumbling clumsily in the snow. "They'll call you a hero," Harper said softly. Wyatt shook his head. "I just did what needed doing." Maple leaned into him, solid and warm. For the first time in years, Wyatt felt it fully. Not the adrenaline, not the aftermath, but something quieter. Belonging. Purpose not defined by rank or mission, but by choice. The storm passed overhead, leaving Silver Ridge wrapped in white and something like peace. Winter loosened its grip on Silver Ridge slowly, as if reluctant to leave. Snow still lay thick along the rooftops and tree lines, but the air no longer cut quite so deep. Sunlight lingered a little longer each day, catching on ice and turning it to silver. Wyatt Hale noticed the change while standing outside the cabin one morning. Maple pressed against his leg, her breath steady and warm through his jeans. For the first time since arriving in town, he wasn't counting days. He stayed. The decision didn't arrive with drama or speeches. It came quietly, in the rhythm of mornings spent helping Harper Quinn at the clinic, in afternoons walking the forest edge with Maple and her pups, and in evenings when the weight inside his chest felt manageable instead of crushing. Silver Ridge had a way of giving space without pushing, of offering support without questions. Wyatt found that he needed that more than he had ever needed a uniform. Harper noticed the shift before he spoke it aloud. She had grown more relaxed, too. With the clinic no longer teetering on collapse, her movements carried less urgency, more confidence. Her auburn hair was often braided loosely now, her green eyes bright with plans instead of worry. One evening, as they sat at the clinic's worn wooden table reviewing supply lists, Wyatt finally said it. "I'm not leaving." Harper looked up, searching his face. "You're sure?" He nodded. "This place saved me." She smiled softly. "Then let's make sure it keeps saving others." The idea for Maple Haven Center took shape over weeks. What began as a corner of the clinic became something larger, a space dedicated to rescue, recovery, and rebuilding trust, both human and canine. Wyatt worked with his hands, repairing beams, insulating walls, adapting old rooms into training spaces. His movements were careful but steady, the scarred leg growing stronger with use. Maple watched over everything like a silent supervisor. Her leg healed well, the limp fading until only memory remained. Rusty grew into his name, energetic, fearless, bounding across the snow with endless enthusiasm. Juniper stayed close, thoughtful and attentive, her eyes tracking every sound. Together they drew people in. Veterans from neighboring towns stopped by, some curious, some desperate, all cautious. The dogs met them without judgment. Wyatt saw something change in those men and women when they knelt to greet Maple or laughed as Rusty barreled into their knees. It wasn't therapy in the formal sense. It was connection, familiar, honest. The day Maple Haven Center opened, the town gathered despite the cold. A modest wooden sign hung above the door, its lettering burned deep into the grain. Inside, the space smelled of fresh pine and coffee. Harper moved through the crowd with quiet pride, greeting neighbors, explaining programs, listening more than she spoke. Sheriff Cole Whitmore stood near the entrance, arms crossed, scanning the room out of habit. He looked different now, less burdened, the lines around his eyes eased. When Wyatt approached, Cole extended a hand. "You built something good here," he said simply. Wyatt shook it. Couldn't have done it alone. Maple settled at Wyatt's feet as he stepped forward to speak. The room grew quiet. "I don't do speeches," Wyatt began, voice steady but unpolished. "But I owe this town the truth. If Maple hadn't found me that night, I'd still be out there in the snow. She didn't just save my life. She reminded me how to live it." He glanced at Harper, then at the crowd. "And this place, this community, pulled me back when I didn't think I wanted to be found." Applause rose, not loud, but heartfelt. Across the county line, justice moved with less ceremony, but greater weight. The courthouse in Campbell County was a solid, aging building, its stone steps dusted with snow. Inside, Evan Briggs stood before the bench, shoulders slumped, bravado stripped away. He looked smaller without the forest at his back, his beard trimmed short, his eyes darting toward the floor. The judge, Marianne Keller, was a composed woman in her late 50s, silver hair pulled back neatly, her voice firm but measured. She read the charges clearly, methodically. Illegal trapping on a large scale, destruction of protected land, assault on a law enforcement officer. The sentence followed. 5 years in state prison for the trapping operation, 18 additional months for the assault, a lifetime ban on firearms ownership and the use of traps of any kind. The gavel fell once. Back in Silver Ridge, the news traveled fast. People exhaled. Parents let children roam closer to the woods again. The forest felt safer, quieter, as if something dark had been lifted from its roots. Wyatt learned of the sentence while repairing a fence at Maple Haven. He paused, hands resting on the post, and nodded once. No triumph, just relief. That evening the town gathered again, smaller this time. Harper poured coffee. Someone brought homemade stew. Rusty chased a mitten across the floor, while Juniper curled beside a visiting veteran, her head resting gently on his boot. Wyatt sat on the steps as dusk settled in, Maple pressed against his side. Harper joined him, shoulder brushing his. "You've found your place," she said softly. He smiled. "I think it found me." Snow began to fall again. Not a storm, just a quiet, steady drift. Lights glowed warm through the windows of Maple Haven Center, reflecting off the white ground like embers. Wyatt watched Rusty and Juniper tumble through the flakes, Maple's steady presence anchoring everything. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like home. Sometimes life doesn't change with a loud moment or a grand rescue. Sometimes it changes quietly. When someone stays, when a hand reaches out, when a heart chooses not to turn away. This story isn't only about a soldier or a dog or a small town in winter. It's about what happens when pain meets compassion, about how healing doesn't always come from strength, but from connection, about how even the most broken moments can become the beginning of something new. In our daily lives, we all carry unseen battles, and sometimes the thing that saves us isn't a miracle from the sky. It's a loyal presence, a kind word, or the courage to accept help when we need it most. If this story touched you, take a moment to share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us what this story made you feel, or a moment when kindness changed your life. And if you believe in second chances, quiet strength, and the bond between humans and animals, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more stories that remind us we're never truly alone.